Okay, in the last video we covered how to sculpt our ZBrush high resolution object, and then we covered how to export out the high res and the low res. So in this video we're going to cover how to unwrap the low resolution, the low poly model, and how to do it in Maya 2018 as easy as possible. Alright, so here's what the end result is going to look like. We have the unwrapped maps, and we have our object right here. So if I click off that, you can see here's the low poly object, and it has all the unwrapped UVs on there. So let's minimize that, and let's start over. So the first thing I want to do is import in our files. I can either go through, let's say, File, Import, and pull up where I last left off at that pillar demo, and pull these through this way, or I can just drag and drop them in there. So let's say I take the bust low res, and I'll start with the high res. Pull in the bust high res, and you can see it pops in somewhere up there. Alright, so here's the high res model that came in from ZBrush. If I want to grab the other one, I can just easily go through pillar high res, drag that in there, and boom, that pops in. You can see everything left in the same location as last time. I could use the original file which had the base shapes in there, or I could start a brand new file. Either option doesn't matter. I don't need the original low res, the original base shapes anymore. They were just to get into ZBrush to have an easier sculpting base. But if you want to use the original file, you can hide the other objects and just keep everything organized. In this case, I'm just going to start over. But since I'm starting over, the grid is a bit smaller since it's now down here. I want to keep everything consistent. So under Windows, Settings and Preferences, I'm going to change the settings for the grid size to meters. So when we go into Unity, everything should be scaled correctly. So this is meters, press save, and so now if I build a box, let's say the box is this big, you can see that the object's going to be a bit smaller when it pops into Unity. It won't be exact to scale, so I can either scale this now or scale it later, but at some point I should have started the base shape at the correct size, so I'm going to have to adjust that. So let me import the other ones before I fix the scaling issue, and then we'll go to unwrapping. Alright, so let's review what we have here. So you can see the ZBrush model came in quite detailed. There's quite a lot of polys on here, so this is something you wouldn't want to put in the game engine. You also don't want to unwrap this. It's just a lot of polygons to unwrap, so we're going to unwrap the low res. So again, don't unwrap the high res, there's no need to. We're just going to bake off the details that we need. Also of note, you can see that the topology still has a little bit of I guess polygons, I guess you say, kind of like that pixelation, but more polygon shapes. They're not 100% smooth, so that's a level of ZBrush sculpting. So going to the next subdivision level in ZBrush can smooth that out and just keep sculpting away. I didn't bother to go that far for the demo purposes, but you can see that's what you're getting. So Maya does carry all that detail, or when you export it, even with decimation in there, even though it is triangles, it's retaining what you originally had in your high poly when you sculpted in ZBrush. If you wanted to get rid of these shapes, and it also applies down here to the pillar, you can see it still has those hard edges, so just going higher in the smoothing subdivision would fix that. But if you want to minimize that here in Maya, I can click on this thing and go to Mesh Display, Soften Edge, and by clicking on this, you can see that it does smooth that out, so they're not as prominently noticeable. They're a lot smoother, so that is an option you can go with. Similarly for here, G repeats the last command, which was soften edges. Click off that and you can see that it smoothed out a lot of the details. Also, it smooths out a bit much, so if you wanted more of that coarse, rocky look, you may not want to smooth, but again, if you sculpted it higher in ZBrush, it would come out cleaner when you go through the smoothing option up there. But otherwise, this is completely done. I don't need to mess with this anymore, so I'm going to put this, or basically hide this and import the low res. So I'm going to select both of these and click on this little option which says create a new layer with the selected objects, and I'm going to click on that and it automatically creates the layer, so I can turn it off and on. So right now I'm going to double click on the word layer and rename this high resolution or high poly or whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to click off and hide that on the view, the little V button right there, so it hides it, so I don't need to see that anymore. Let's jump back over to this one. So let's grab the bust low res and the pillar low res and bring both of these in here as well. Boom. So these are the low poly versions we exported at ZBrush as well. You can see they're a lot more low poly. It's going to be easier to unwrap this because it's fewer polygons to worry about. Detail-wise, it's still not super detailed, but we're going to copy the details across. We do want to smooth this as well, but I'm going to wait until after I finish the unwrapping. Just makes it a little easier to see where the hard edges are, so I'm going to unwrap or soften that later. But for now, select this and add this to its own layer. So add that, double click, and call this low res, and pull, save. All right, cool. I also sculpted a vine as well, just so you have a little more detail to it. Maybe put some leaves on there, so I'll drop this in here as well. So this vine right here is basically just a bunch of polygons. It's about 300 triangles, 150 faces. Just something really simple. I just took a cylinder and just kind of added edge loops and just kind of extruded it and pulled it up and kind of stretched it into place. So we can unwrap that and add a little extra detail. So this one, because we're, well, I'll just put it on here anyway. So right click, add selected objects. If you already have your layer, you can't click it again, just add selected objects by holding the right click. So that puts it on here and they both turn off and on. Cool, and I'll put the leaves on afterwards later. So that's what we have right now. So let's fix the scaling issue. So I'm going to turn both of these on so I can select both at once. Select across so I grab everything and figure out how tall I want this. Since the pivot is already sitting on the origin point, that's perfect. I'll just scale it upwards. If this is 1 meter high and a person, let's say, is 2 meters high, let's say a person's generally 1.8 meters tall. And so that half of that would be, move this up by 0.9, so that puts it back on the grid. So a person is this tall. So if the person's this tall, let's say grab all these, scale. Let's say I want this to be somewhere around person height. So a little shorter than person height, maybe a little smaller. So something about that looks cool. I'll do 1.75, keep it even. All right, and we'll call that good enough. I can delete out this. And so now when I go to export, let's go to File, Export Selection. You don't need to select anything to set the units. So scroll down here to General Options, under Include, Advanced Setting, Advanced Options, Units, and uncheck Automatic and set that to centimeters. This way Unity will, you build it in meters, export into centimeters, and Unity pops it in 1:1 scale perfectly fine. So once that's set to centimeters, we're good to go. Let's turn off high res, and now we can start unwrapping. All right, so let's start with, I guess, the bust. So we'll start with this one first. Actually, let me rename some things. I'm just going to rename this to, I'll take all that out, SM Static Mesh Bust. Usually it's helpful to put prefixes in front of your objects. Let's say SM for Static Mesh. In other words, it's an object in your game that doesn't move. You can put like, let's see, TX or TXT for textures. You can do characters as like CH or something, and you just prefix everything, makes it kind of identifiable when you first see something. So up to you if you want to go with the naming conventions. Pillar, static mesh pillar, and these will actually combine because there's no reason to pull the vine off separately. I'm making two separate objects in case, like, for some reason you knock the pillar over, you knock the bust over. If they're separable, if you want them combined, you can just select everything, go mesh combine, but I'm going to leave them separate in case I want something to fall apart. This, however, even though I will be combining it, I don't want to bake it at the moment, so I'm going to leave that separate, and I'll deal with it later. All right, cool. So let's go back to unwrapping. I'm going to do one at a time, and it gets a little hard to unwrap and see things when you can't get past, you can't see this underneath here. So I'm going to use hold Control and press 1 on the keyboard, and with this selected, it hides everything else. So now I can much easily see the bottom and where I can mark my UV cutouts. All right, so start with this one. And my 2018 has something really new and awesome. If you could click on the UV menu right here. And just in case you don't see this, this is under the modeling tab. If I switch to, let's say, animation, you won't see UVs up there. So let's switch to the modeling tab and back to UVs. So click on UVs, and you can see everything new in 2018 is in green. 3D Cut and Sew tool is new. So I'll click on this, and actually, before I do this, I need to fix one more thing. Under UV editor, as you can see, there are no UVs. They don't even exist. Usually when you build something, let's say I build a square, by default UVs come in. But because I sent this to, put that back, okay. Because I sent this to ZBrush and brought it back out of ZBrush, ZBrush didn't have UVs to come with it anymore. Even though we built the base shape in Maya, the OBJ file didn't carry it and ZBrush didn't use it, so we have no UVs. So in order to use this new 3D cut and sew, we need to create UVs. So when you pull this up, you'll get this UV toolkit menu. If for some reason it doesn't open or you've lost it, it's going to be under Tools, Show UV Toolkit. And that pulls this back up. Alternatively, some of the options are also right here. So the option I'm going to be using right now is under Create, and I'm going to go with Planar Map. So Planar Map, and it just creates UVs. Not going to be the cleanest, but it works. So if we do same thing, Planar Maps right there. All right, so what we have now, if I zoom in, this is kind of expanding on continuing where last left off with in the How to Unwrap UVs in 2018. If I click on this little button, this will show me a checker pattern, and I can see what happened with UVs. Some of them are square, and some are streaking, so we're going to go fix that until everything's nice and square-shaped. But we needed at least something to start with, so I'm going to turn that back off. It's easier to see. And now that I've done this, I don't really need this either, so I'm going to close this back out. Cool, so we're going to click off that, and everything's good to go. So now we can go to Object Mode and UV 3D Cut and Sew. So I'm going to click on this, and now we can start creating UVs. If I go over to, let's say, usually what happens when you have a face or a person, you want to keep the face intact in one clean area, and if you have to put a cut line somewhere where you can peel it apart, because essentially, if you guys remember, we're peeling off the skin, I guess, in a way, so peeling off the surface. So if I want to keep this part intact, I need to put a cut line somewhere. So I'm going to cut down the back side of the head so I can peel this part forward and peel this part forward, so this leaves the face in the middle. And then I'm going to peel off the whole bottom and let that be its own piece, so that I can take a top-down view and take all of the shoulders, and so this front part will peel forward and this back part will peel backwards, and that will lay out our character nice and cleanly. So in order to do that, let's start with, I guess we'll go with the head first. So I'm going to start clicking. In order to start with this tool, you have to click and drag. So left mouse button, click and drag, and you can see that it starts cutting lines. If for some reason you're selected in faces, it could be, if you hold right click component, you might be in face mode if you see a bunch of faces selected. So hold down right click, go up to component, and go to edge mode. So we want to do this in edge mode. Once you've started, you can just manually click the left mouse button and keep adding. So I want to keep adding these cut lines, or I can just click and keep dragging down there, but as you can see, sometimes it misgrabs the wrong one, so I can try again. Yeah, sometimes I just like to click it because it's just a little easier to follow along. So I'm going to peel down the back so I can peel it forward. You want to, sometimes it doesn't click or it doesn't select. If you double click, you can get it back to selecting. So it's sometimes a combination of double clicking, regular left clicking, and dragging it across to get things to work. So you want to put this cut line somewhere. You could try and trace along, let's say, the outer edge right here where the hairline is, but then you might get this polygon shape mismatch where the hair actually hits the skin. So it all depends where you want to put the cut line, but definitely don't put the cut line down the face because you'll see that the most. This back part of the head is least likely to be seen, so that's kind of why I'm putting it in the back. So let's continue down. I'm going to cut off around the neckline, so let's click around the neck and let's keep clicking and until I've separated the neck from the clothes. So I'm doing it down here because, again, it's very unlikely to see this area because it's kind of stuck in a crevice area. So I want to hide these UV cut lines as best I can. If you're using other software, such like Substance Painter to paint your textures, looks like that's the wrong place. The seams make it easier to manage, but if you're texturing with Photoshop, it's hard to match pieces back together. Let me pull up the UV pattern again. So UV editor. So while this is open, you can see that it defaults created the next piece. If I press Ctrl Z, so I go back one before that was separated, so once I put that last piece in there, it'll break that off. So you can see you successfully cut apart this piece. So this is now one separate piece. Now let's continue on. If you don't see different colors occurring, that's because this isn't turned on. Left mouse button will show you your inside out polygon. So since I did planar from this direction, everything facing this way is a backwards flipped upside down polygon. That's why you're seeing the mismatched colors. But if I right click on this button, it'll show me my shading group so I can see which is a separate UV shell. This will make sense later, so just skip that for now. So let's say that peels off, so that'll peel forward, this side will peel forward, and I'll have just the face on one piece. Usually what happens also when you're doing faces, you need to cut under the chin as well in order for that to, and again, double click sometimes. Or click there we go. So sometimes you just need to make sure it intersects the last white edge so it can continue. So anyway, you want to, and then sometimes you need to double click again. You need to usually cut the underside of the chin so that can separate, otherwise you're going to get a lot of distortions because there's a lot of protrusion where the chin is sticking out and you're going to get a lot of stretching right here. So if you cut, it makes it easier from the point that you cut around the neck seam all the way out. It just peels off a lot easier. Alright, and that should work pretty well for the face. So now let's cut off the bottom edge. So I'm going to look for a place that's, again, not very noticeable. Let's say right here. So again, if it doesn't start, just double click and you can get it started. And if that doesn't work, you have to hold your left click and drag across and you'll start getting them. Except that it keeps getting too many that I don't want. So let's try this again. Okay. And then if you want to get rid of something, just hold Control and click it and it'll unselect it. Then you can click the one you want correctly. So that should work right there. And let's continue on. So again, I want to put these cut lines in places that aren't very noticeable. So I could cut right here on this seam because again, it's a corner, or corners are the best place to cut things. I could also cut again here on another corner, but chances are I might see a cut line right there where my metal textures might not match. So here would be the best because you're not going to see it end at some corner, but here is probably the best of the best because it's completely hidden under here. The likelihood of me as a player walking around and staring underneath here to try and find that is a lot less likely, so it's best to hide them in areas that you can't see. So that tends to be a really nice place to put this. So I'm just going to keep following this crevice area and putting all my cut lines around here. Switch out that one. Let's go this direction. Actually, let's move it this way. So let's try and speed this up a little bit. So click, go back, oops, up this way and across. And this way and back down. And then reconnect. So across this way and boom, done. So when I click that, it should separate in colors, so I know that this has now been cut off and it's one separate UV shell. This is one separate UV shell, so a planar map would basically give you a flat plane. Top-down view would be a nice plane to this one, and we're just going to do a plane from the front of this character's face. And I should finish that. So at this point, we just have to unwrap it. So I usually use W to jump out of the 3D tool. Now I'm back in Move tool. Now I can right click, go to Object Mode, and then while I still have the UV toolkit open, I can press the Unfold option and Unfold, and you'll see this thing will be nice and neat. So I press Unfold, and boom, done. Super easy. Actually, let me Control Z that. So you can see beforehand, I've got this streaking pattern, and if you know where to put these cut lines, it's kind of a trial and error in understanding the concept of where cut lines are going to go. I press Unfold, and everything squares out and it cleans up all the distortions. So nice and clean. Alright, if I want to hide the checker pattern here, I can just click the little image here and that hides it. So it still leaves it here, I just don't have to see it here. If you want to make sure all your texels are correct, in other words, your checker pattern is matching the other checker patterns, you can grab one of them, let's say right click, go to UV shell, pick one of them, and under transform, you can select get, and it gets the texel resolution. You can select the other two and press set, and it'll correct them to be all the same size. Sometimes, even though it has corrected, these may not be the most optimal. So if you want to make it more optimal, you can select all three shells and go down to optimize, and you click on this and you can see that it's slightly adjusted and tries to optimize it. You can probably click a couple times, see if it makes any more adjustments. So it makes it a little more square shaped, so it's a little easier. If I want to make the head a little more, let's say click on the face, go to scale, while in the UV shell I can scale this a little more. The smaller the squares, the more texel density I get, which is the more pixels being used, and the more pixels being used gives you much more sharper detail. So I want to have the most sharpest detail on the face because that's probably what you're going to be looking at the most. So I'm going to give that the at least equal to this, possibly slightly more if I want to put more emphasis on the character's face. So I click off that, you can see that that works. I'm going to select all three of these and go down to arrange and layout, and I guess click on layout, and that should lay out everything. It reduces everything to fit inside there. Probably not the most optimal. It probably could have done a little better. Let's try it again. Or not. Sometimes, most of the time it works, but sometimes not. So I'm just going to move this manually here, and now I can afford to make these bigger. But in the end, this isn't going to matter because I still have to do the pillars, so there's no need to keep trying to fit these as best as possible since I need all the other pieces. Alright, either way, so this is pretty much finished. Object mode, and this guy is done. Alright, let's move on to finish up the base of the pillar. So let me Control 1 to unhide everything else, click on this guy, and Control 1 to hide everything else. So that's, we're back to here, but again there's no UV, so if I were to go to 3D cut and sew, and I start cutting, there's nothing to cut. Even if I hold Control and drag across things, there's nothing to cut because there are no UVs. So back to object, W in the keyboard, object mode. Now I can click on this guy, and I want to create a planar map just so I have UVs to work with. Turn off checker pattern, don't need that. And let's go back to UV, 3D cut and sew, and turn off checker pattern again. And you can see the faces are selected, so I'm going to right click component and go to edge mode so I can start collecting edges. I'm going to cut off the whole top piece as a separate piece so I can do a top-down view of the textures. I'm going to do the same for the bottom, cut off the bottom piece so it's a top-down flat view, and then basically have a cylinder unwrap for the rest of the pillars. So I'm going to put one slice down the corner and peel off all four sides so they, like a square, will line up with in one long sheet. So I'll see all the sides next to each other except for one piece cut. Alright, so let's do that real quick. And then the rock's kind of a spherical kind of thing. So let's kind of figure out where I want to put these lines. Where's the most hidden space I can put it? I'll probably go here. So hold Control and just start dragging, and then you can start clicking. Let's switch that one to this one, and that one. And I guess I have to double click it. Alright, and double click that one, and that one. Alright then, let's try this again. Hold Control, hold left and drag across. So now that I've got white base, I can continue double clicking and getting the rest. Alright, so yeah, sometimes it's a little tricky getting this 3D cut and sew tool to work. But as long as I keep going around, I'm just trying to cut everything off nice and cleanly. Maybe not that one. Let's go with, sometimes they're hard to reach. That one. At some point I lost the tool. Alright, that one. Continuing on this one, and this should make a different color now, so click on that and it completely separates that piece off. If you might remember from making squares, we want to make these squares as, our squares need to be cut down the sides, otherwise this undercut's not going to unwrap very well, so I need to put a cut somewhere. So I guess I'll click here, 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 and I don't want the cut to be as, I want the cut to be as hidden as possible, but in order to avoid texture stretching, I need to cut at least the corners somewhere. So I'm going to cut around here, so that's probably good enough. So I cut the corner upwards and cut the corner upwards. Let's go this way. So that goes up, and then one last one. So unfortunately, I will end up seeing a seam coming up on these corners, but it's not super noticeable to have one little corner, and for the sake of having this entire area super stretched. So that's now good to go. And then let's pick a spot to cut these. So if this is the front, let's pick the back somewhere. Let's say I come down, I'm looking for those crevices again to hide the cut lines. So I guess this one, that one, that one. And let's continue with the back. So I'll go this way, down there, 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 yep, there. And I'll switch out to this one. This way, this way. Cool. Alright, and that should finish off that one. The last thing is to cut off the bottom part. So let's just switch that one out. Let's go this way. Switch that one out. Let's go this way. Oops. Let's go this way. So where you go doesn't super matter. It's just trying to figure out the most efficient method of where you're not going to see this line at. But if you pick one line or the other, it's not it's not going to break your piece or anything. Cool. And that, nope, doesn't finish yet. This one, and oh, one more. Boom. So it makes a new color there. And this one doesn't change color because all I did was cut this one and in half. So it's still the same piece. It's just going to wrap all the way around all four directions. And this is just one line where it cuts across and it's hidden as well as possible here. Actually, it looks like this isn't the best place. So hold Control and you can click this again and then click where you would like to relocate that. Alright, so that seems like it's more hidden in the recesses. Maybe I could have gone this way instead of going that way, but it should still work out. Cool. Alright, I guess that'll work. Alright, so that's a separate piece, and this is good to go. The last thing is to finish up these little circle things. So again, spherical collider, spherical unwrapping you could work with, or you can just manually cut them again. Not there. Let's see, cut up this way, and cut one this way, and this way, and cut up. Actually, now it's more likely to be seen. So I'll put one here, and so this one can peel off that way. This can peel up this way, and this can peel up, but really should have another cut somewhere in order to minimize distortions, but it might work, and 3 cuts right there, that should be enough. We'll see. This way I don't have to see the seam right here, kind of from that front view that I'll be looking at. So let's see what that does. And then this one, let's go with hold Control, or just hold your left click and start drawing, except I don't want that one. Click that one, and might as well cut the back side up. So that should be enough to peel that direction up, this direction up, and that way. Cool. Alright, and the last one. So I'll put a cut line right here. Not that one. Oops. Not the easiest tool to make use of. Alright, cool. Unclick that. I'll add the line here, here, so I've got the bottom cut. Might as well click that one, but not all the way off. So this will peel off, and this will peel open, and I should probably cut one more angle. It might be good enough. I'll put one there. Okay, so that can peel up, and that can, that big point is kind of large, so I'll put one there, and I'll remove that one. Alright, so that should be enough to kind of work with, hopefully. Alright, W to get out of that mode, go back to object mode, and you may notice that these two little pieces didn't work very well. The decimation does as well as it can, but these should be rocks and not little triangles. So I'm going to go to face mode and select this one and press delete. I don't need those. So in order to fix that, I'm just going to back to object mode, select this entire piece, Control D on the keyboard for duplicate, and then move it over here, and then go to face mode. I want to keep this guy, let's say, so double click on him, and then hold shift, select all this, and that'll invert my selection. So essentially everything's selected except for this guy. Delete on the keyboard, right click, object mode, and let's put him back to where he was at 0. And then let's modify center pivot and move this rock over to here. So let's turn on high res and figure out where those rocks went. And press Control 1 to unhide everything. So let's scale this a little smaller, move this over here. Let's rotate it. And since I've already done the unwrapping once, it'll automatically carry over. I can adjust the scale a little bit if I want. I can rotate a little more. Whatever angle I want to put it at, as long as it's close enough, that's all that matters. Okay, Control D to duplicate again. Put this over here. And let's move this guy down, over, rotate, scale a little smaller, move them. Close enough. It's so tiny, it shouldn't make much of a big deal as long as it's nearby. Alright, so let's hide the high res and everything should be good to go. So now I can select all these pieces and my big mess of stones right here should be perfectly fine. Again, it's once you understand the pattern of unwrapping, how basic geometric shapes unwrap, it should be pretty easy to work with. So let's click on unfold and everything should magically unfold. Maybe not the right size, but it unfolds. So I just need to fix the sizing now. So let's go with right click, UV shell. I'll start with this one. I'll call this the average size. Let's get, which is under the transform up here. So get, and then select everything and set. And now everything should be relatively size comparative to each other. So let's organize these a little better. Let's go to orient shells, and that should line them up. This one looks like it might be upside down, and I kind of want to reverse that. So actually, instead of manually rotating, I can just go to, again, under transform, click and click again, that rotates that. So this is, if I go to edge mode, you can see this is the bottom edge. So I put the bottom on the bottom, makes a little more sense. There is a UV shell sitting under here. Let's find out what that is. This is both of these two little stones, which means there's two pieces stacked on top. So that's the other two stones. All right, cool. So that's generally what we're looking at. Let's take all these things and I can press layout if I want, and that'll put them all inside here. Usually it lays them out correctly, but it didn't seem to work this time. All right, cool. So if I put checker pattern on, everything should be nice and clean, and checker pattern to optimize as much as possible. If not, you can click this and go to optimize again a couple times and see if that kind of straightens out your topology. And you can see it changed it, whereas it was, if I Control Z a few times, you see it was a lot more curvy, which had a little bit of distortions in this area. So you can see the squares were kind of twisted around a little bit, but using the optimize smooths it out a bit more. So I can try layout again, but it doesn't seem to be laying out very well. It doesn't matter. All these pieces should be good to go. And lastly, let's go back to object mode and let's unwrap this guy real quick. So Control 1 to hide everything. Let's toss on. In this case, I'm going to use cylindrical. Let's see if I can do this really quick. So cylindrical, and then let's see, UV 3D cut. And so because this is quads and not triangles, it should be easier to work with. I think the back side is probably here. Edge mode, and let's try this one. So if I double click once, because it's quads, it'll run down all the way for me and make this much easier. Triangles, I couldn't do that last time. Actually, let's switch it to this direction. All right, cool. So all the way down to the bottom tip, and then all the way up to the top as well as possible. Cool. All right, now it should be very well hidden from sight because this is the direction we're looking at. So if I do Control 1, you can see that, yes, it hid the seam as well as we can hide it behind things. And so let's go to UV W to jump out of the 3D tool. UV shell, click on it, and let's go to unfold. Boom. And it straightens it out a nice straight line. Let's go to orient so it levels it out. Let's go to, I guess, rotate so it puts it 90 degrees upwards. And manually move it over here, figure out if this is upside down or not. Let's go to UVs, grab this. This is the top, so it is upside down. Select all of it, flip, flip. So now this is the bottom, just so when I'm coloring, I know which side is up and down. Back to object mode, and that's done. So if I select everything, everything's all good to go. I just need to put all of it inside of the UV editor or UV square template. So here's the 0, here's the 1, and then here's the other one, so it needs to fit inside of 0 to 1. So let's go right click UV shell, select everything. Actually start with 1. Let's pick, let's say, this guy. And let's get his texel resolution, select everything, and let's set everything to be the same. So all the squares should unify, so everything's pretty proportional. Now I can go with, let's say, orient, sure, why not? That straightens it in case it was crooked. And then let's go layout, and it lays it out. It probably could have done better than that. Let's try it again. Tried it again. So it's probably not going to figure it out any better than that. But let's say I go through now and organize a little bit more. So if I want to give more clarity to the face, let's click on the face, go to scale, and scale a little bigger. So I want to give more clarity to this. Let's say the armor is kind of important also, so I'll make that a little bigger, and then make the face a little bigger. So essentially, at the cost of this being more blurry, this is going to be a little more clear. Only very slightly. You can see the squares are still pretty similar to matching. This piece, however, doesn't need to be this big. So if I scale it down, because the pillar will probably never be knocked over, I don't need a lot of clarity. But I don't want to delete it because just in case I do have this fall over inside the game, I don't want to have a hole in the bottom. So I'm going to conserve space and make that smaller so everything else can get bigger. And let's say the same thing with this one. This probably won't be seen very much, so I'm going to make it slightly smaller just so I can make more space. And then let's see if I can fit that any better. So layout, and it's not quite making it any more larger to work with. I can try and manually adjust some of these things. Let's say I move this guy further over here. Maybe I can get this guy over here some more, and then maybe up here. I guess not. I guess this is best as I'm going to get it. I can try and scale it up just so I can maximize as much as I can get out of this. I can manually rotate this, pull that down. Let's move this guy out of the way, pull this up, and put this guy back down here. Cool. Yeah, it's probably as nice as I'm going to get this arrangement. I don't want to waste any space like this. You can see its texture is still going to be used in Unity. I'm still going to be costing the game engine pixels, so it's best if I could fill them up with as many as I can. But since I can't, and that's as nice as I'm going to get, I might as well put this over here and make this a little larger, and just so I can go back to the resolution it was at before. And this one I might as well make larger again because I'm not conserving any more space. So those are all my rocks and stones. Since they have the room, I might as well make them bigger because it's going to go into the game engine anyway. So it's about as big as I'm going to get all these pieces. Cool. So I've got the vine over here. Let's make sure it's still vertical, correct. So that's the bottom, and that's the bottom, correct. And so that should be everything. Everything's clean and organized. All right, and now I can, let's say, close out this and this, and everything should be good to go. Okay, let's click off that object mode, and let's wipe out all the history because there's a lot of history in all these pieces, and I don't need all this history. Also, these little rocks should get mixed back together, so let's select these. Also of note, if you click on this and you only see these, you don't see those little rocks, it only shows what you're selected on. So if you want to see everything in here for non-combined objects, just select everything and you'll see everything combined. Let's select all these and say these are going to be the same piece. So let's go mesh, combine, and now they're all the same piece. I'm going to leave this separate until we finish the baking process. And let's select all these, wipe out the history. And so that's the bust, that's the It got renamed from the combining. Let's call that vine again. Oops. Static mesh pillar. Okay. I will leave it at that for now. Cool. So, alright, everything's good to go. Let's move into the baking our projection map next video. Oh yeah, one last thing. I forgot we need to smooth out the model first. So let's select on this and let's go to Soften Edge, which again is under Mesh Display, Soften Edge. I just have a shortcut right there. You can get shortcuts by holding Shift and clicking on it, or Control. I think it's hold Shift and click. Alright, cool. So now everything's smooth. So this is what you're going to want for your baking. So let's select all this again and wipe out the history. Shortcut, otherwise it's under Edit, Delete by Type, History. Cool, and now we're good to go.